high in the Austrian Alps. In a region known as the Lungau, often referred to by locals as Austria's Siberia, there is a farm sitting at an elevation of 1,500 meters. This landscape experiences up to 170 days of frost a year. By every modern agricultural metric, this land should be a barren, frozen expanse, capable of supporting only sparse alpine grasses or struggling pine trees. Yet, this 45-hectare property, known as the Krameterhof, defies the laws of high-altitude biology. It produces an abundance of pumpkins, radishes, cherries, and even kiwis, all without a single drop of commercial irrigation and without the protection of climate-controlled greenhouses. It survives severe droughts and freezing temperatures perfectly intact. To a visiting agronomist, it looks like a glitch in the natural order. But the secret to this impossible harvest isn't in a genetically modified seed, and it isn't in an experimental fertilizer. The secret is buried underground. Beneath the lush crops are massive, deliberate mounds of rotting, discarded wood. We have been taught by a century of industrial farming that soil must be perfectly flat, heavily tilled, and meticulously clean of debris to grow food. But what if a pile of dead, decaying logs is actually a high-capacity biological battery? This is the science of Hügelkultur, the 300-year-old method that creates a self-watering, self-heating garden, and why the ideological obsession with clean farming and the machine age nearly erased it from the earth. If you believe true independence means building systems that outlast us, rather than buying products that wash away every spring, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Ancestral Yields. Your support helps us resurrect the permanent methods the industrial age tried to bury. The practice of Hügelkultur, a German word translating directly to mound culture or hill culture, was utilized by Eastern European and Germanic peasants for centuries. It was a survival technique for growing food on unforgiving, rocky slopes. The method was first formalized in writing in 1962 by a German gardener named Hermann André, who noticed that plants inexplicably thrived when growing out of piles of woody debris. But the method's greatest modern test belongs to Sepp Holzer. In 1962, Holzer took over his family's heavily indebted alpine farm. At the time, the Austrian agricultural authorities were issuing strict mandates. To modernize, farmers were ordered to flatten their land, specialize in single-crop dairy or timber, and remove all natural obstructions. Holzer refused. Instead of flattening his mountain, he built massive Hügelkultur mounds using trees that had been blown down in winter storms. He covered the massive logs with earth and planted directly into the sides of the steep hills. Holzer's defiance earned him the title of the Rebel Farmer. He was not fighting a chemical monopoly. He was fighting a government obsessed with standardization. He was heavily fined and even threatened with prison by the Austrian Agricultural and Forestry Commissions for his messy and unorthodox land management. They claimed his mounds were a blight that defied proper land use regulations. Yet, while the neighboring modernized farms struggled with freezing topsoil and erosion, Holzer's wood core mounds created localized microclimates that allowed him to grow crops that normally could not survive the alpine freeze. He proved the mountain peasants were right all along. So, what is the method behind the madness? To understand why a buried log can transform a barren landscape, we must look at the physics of coarse woody debris. When you bury a hardwood log under a layer of soil, it does not simply rot. It undergoes a profound biological transformation. White rot fungi begin to break down the lignin within the wood. As the rigid cellular structure of the wood decays, it turns into a massive subterranean sponge. The moisture retention of this biological sponge is staggering. In 2016, researchers at Western Kentucky University conducted a quantitative analysis of Hügelkultur beds compared to traditional flat earth control plots during a dry summer. The data was definitive. The soil in the Hügelkultur beds retained an incredible 59% water by weight, compared to just 33% in the flat control plots. The wood captures moisture during the wet season and slowly releases it to the plant roots during a drought through capillary action. But the mound does more than just hold water. Decomposition is an exothermic chemical reaction. As the fungi slowly break down the dense wood over a period of 10 to 20 years, they generate a steady, subtle heat. A Hügelkultur mound acts as a biological furnace, keeping the root zone of the plants several degrees warmer than the surrounding ambient air. This internal thermal mass is exactly what allowed Sepp Holzer to keep the soil alive and productive, while the rest of the mountain was locked in frost. If this ancient method creates a garden that literally waters and heats itself, why did the agricultural establishment try to outlaw it? In the early to mid-20th century, the tractor became the god of the modern farm. But tractors require a very specific environment. The earth must be perfectly flat, perfectly straight, and entirely free of obstacles. This birthed a movement known in agricultural history as clean farming or clean culture. Extension agents and university agronomists began teaching farmers that the landscape needed to be sanitized. Dead wood, organic debris, hedgerows, and natural mounds were suddenly labeled as trash. They were viewed as unsightly, backwards, and dangerous harbors for pests and diseases. Farmers were instructed to burn or haul away all coarse woody debris to make way for the plow. The industry conflated visual tidiness with scientific progress. By forcing the landscape to conform to the machine, the clean farming movement stripped the earth of its natural biological batteries. The removal of woody debris and the flattening of the soil destroyed the land's ability to retain moisture and resist wind. The catastrophic result of this arrogance was seen during the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, and it continues today in the form of massive topsoil erosion. Hügelkultur was abandoned not because it failed to grow food, but because a mound of buried wood could not be driven over by a John Deere tractor. It was sacrificed on the altar of mechanized efficiency. For decades, critics dismissed Hügelkultur as a niche trick that only worked in wet, alpine environments. But soil science has finally caught up to the peasants. To see the true power of buried wood, we must look at the 2014 study by researchers Golden and Hutchinson, conducted in the severely drought-prone, temperate woodlands of Australia. The researchers set out to measure what happens when coarse woody debris is reintroduced to degraded, heavily cleared agricultural land. They embedded moisture sensors deep into the soil beneath the wood and monitored the land through brutal dry spells. The statistical models proved that the presence of the wood fundamentally altered the evaporation rate of the earth itself. Drying times in the soil near the buried wood were 40% longer than in the completely cleared, clean fields. The wood acted as a subterranean reservoir, drastically slowing the rate at which the sun and wind could strip the soil of its lifeblood. The researchers concluded that the retention of woody debris is not just a cold weather phenomenon. It is a vital, scientifically verifiable survival mechanism for water-limited ecosystems facing severe droughts. For the modern homesteader, building a Hügelkultur bed is the ultimate act of reclaiming autonomy from the flat earth industrial complex. However, we must first address a dangerous internet myth. Hügelkultur is not a zero-care magic trick. It is a biological investment. You front-load the management in years 1 and 2 to reap the benefits of a low-water, zero-fertilizer system for the next 2 decades. Building this 20-year soil battery requires a specific biological protocol. First, you must choose the right battery cell. The most efficient woods are dense, spongy hardwoods such as oak, maple, birch, and apple. These decay at a slow, steady rate, maximizing water retention and generating subtle heat over decades. Conversely, strictly avoid allelopathic woods such as black walnut or eucalyptus, which secrete toxins that can poison competing plants. Likewise, never use highly rot-resistant woods such as cedar, cypress, or black locust. These contain natural preservatives that refuse to decompose, which means they will not join the biological circuit of the mound. Once your wood is selected, build the mound in deliberate layers. Dig a shallow trench, about 1 to 2 feet deep, to anchor the bed and capture subsurface runoff. Lay the large, dense logs at the core. Stack smaller branches, twigs, and leaf litter on top, forming a steep A-frame triangle. This steep angle is critical because it catches the low-angled winter sun and allows the bed to thaw 2 to 3 weeks earlier in spring than flat ground. To ensure success and avoid the hidden gotchas of this system, there are 4 hard rules you must follow. Rule number 1, the initial soak, or the thirsty sponge paradox. The claim that you never have to water a Hügelkultur bed is only true after the wood has decayed. In year 1, dead wood is not a sponge, it is a wick. If you bury dry logs, they will pull moisture away from your plant roots. You must heavily saturate the logs with a hose or let them sit through a heavy rainstorm before you bury them. You will actually need to deep water a new hugel mound more than a flat garden in its first season, just to kickstart the fungal rotting process. Rule number 2, the nitrogen jumpstart, stopping the nitrogen robbery. Dead wood has a massive carbon to nitrogen ratio, often around 400 to 1. To digest that carbon, soil, fungi, and bacteria need nitrogen. If the wood lacks it, the microbes will suck the available nitrogen out of your topsoil, a process known as nitrogen immobilization. If you just plant seeds on a raw mound, they will turn yellow and stunt. To prevent this, pack the gaps between the logs with high nitrogen materials such as fresh grass clippings, raw manure, blood meal, or rich kitchen compost. You are feeding the microbes so they do not starve your plants. Rule number 3, the void seal, preventing the vole hotel. Wood needs to be completely encased to break down properly, and you must eliminate deep air pockets. A loosely stacked pile of logs is not a garden. It is a 5-star luxury resort for mice, voles, and yellow jackets. Voles will live inside the deep crevices and eat your root crops from the inside out. Flush loose dirt and compost deep into the gaps of the wood, packing it tightly before covering the entire mound with 2 to 3 inches of topsoil and a heavy layer of mulch. Rule number 4, managing the slump. You must understand that a Hügelkultur bed is a decomposing structure. As the massive logs break down into humus, they physically shrink. A mound built 4 feet high in year 1 will likely subside to 2 feet by year 5. As the earth slumps, sinkholes can form and roots can be exposed. You must perform structural maintenance every year or 2. Top off the bed with fresh compost and heavy mulch to maintain its shape and suppress the weeds that inevitably land on its high surface area slopes. But what if you live in the suburbs and do not have the acreage for massive alpine mounds? The physics of Hügelkultur scale down perfectly for the urban gardener. You can build a mini hügel inside a standard raised bed, a galvanized trough, or even a deep container. By filling the bottom third of your raised bed with rotting hardwood logs, packing the gaps with kitchen scraps, and topping it with a standard soil mix, you create a subterranean sponge that will cut your container watering by up to 70%, all while saving you money on expensive bagged soil. If you put in the labor for the first 2 years, a magical shift happens by year 3. The wood finally collapses into a true subterranean sponge. The nitrogen is released back into the soil. The fungal network fully connects to your plant roots. From that point on, your watering needs drop dramatically. Your need for fertilizer disappears, and you possess one of the most independent, high-yielding systems in the world. Today, the global agricultural system is facing an unprecedented water crisis. Every single year, farmers and gardeners spend billions of dollars fighting their own soil, tilling it to dust, pumping millions of gallons of municipal water to keep it hydrated, and feeding it synthetic salts to replace the biology they destroyed. The history of Hügelkultur, from the mountain peasants of Austria to the rigorous testing in the Australian outback, proves that the answer was never in a more powerful irrigation pump or a larger tractor. The answer was in the mess of nature. Hügelkultur asks us to stop fighting the landscape and start building biological batteries. A properly constructed Hügelkultur bed will feed, heat, and water itself for up to 2 decades from a single pile of discarded trash wood. It breaks the reliance on municipal water and chemical fertilizers permanently. What would you try if standardization was not the rule? If you're ready to build a mountain instead of paying for the flat earth, like this video and subscribe to Ancestral Yields as we rediscover the science they tried to make us forget. See you in the garden.